Hey, Cosmere fans! I'm Ross Leiser. I am a writer and designer on the core design team for the Cosmere RPG, and today I'm here to talk to you about GMing tips. Jumping into a new system, especially a world as deep and rich and complex as Roshar, well, that might be a little intimidating. So I'm here today to give you some tips and guidance to make it just a little bit easier to jump into it. In general, I'm going to give you some basic advice with get familiar with the rules, read up on that beta packet, and just brush up. And then similarly, you might just want to do a little bit of reading on the setting if you aren't familiar. Those are just the very basics, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about today. What I really want to talk about, and something that might seem very obvious, especially to seasoned GMs, but it has a lot more nuance than you might think, and that is communicating with your players. This video is going to primarily play out in 3 sections: before beginning play, during each individual session, and after each session. These are all great opportunities to communicate with your players and make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody's having a good time, and that means you too, GMs, because you are also a player and you deserve to be having a wonderful experience as well. So our first section is communication before the campaign begins. Many people call this a session 0, basically meeting up to discuss what the campaign is going to look like, what the expectations are for the group, and all of that before play even begins, before that session 1. During this, you can discuss a number of different things, like what sort of story do you want to tell together? Do you want to tell a story of warfare? Do you want to tell a story of trying to infiltrate an enemy encampment to rescue prisoners? Do you just want to hang out on the Pure Lake and have some nice cozy times, just developing your characters, interacting? These are all possibilities, and you need to be able to discuss with your players what kind of game you want to run and what kind of game they want to play. Another great question to ask at this session 0 is, how much do each of your players know about the books of the Stormlight Archive or the world of Roshar? Whether they are people who've read every single book 10 times, or people who have never touched one, you can make sure they have a great experience, but you can come armed with the knowledge that they either do or don't, and you can tailor your GMing to that exact style. The next question, and one that we actually cover in our books, is how canon do you want your version of Roshar to be? Is your campaign happening concurrently with the events of the books? Or perhaps do you want to play in an alternate continuity? Do you want to take their place in any scenes? Or perhaps do you want to change the canon entirely and just adapt the game system and its rules to your own setting? That is all completely viable, just as long as everybody is on the same page. Next, in that session 0, you want to talk about safety tools. Now, we have a full write-up on this in the book, and safety tools sometimes get a bad rap, but really what they're here for is to give you the tools and guidance to handle extremely sensitive topics, especially those that parallel real-world marginalization, like caste systems and strict gender roles, slavery, racism, and xenophobia. All of these are elements of Roshar and the Stormlight Archive setting. And it's important to have the discussion with your players of how prominently do you want these to feature? Yes, they're part of the background, but do you want them to be part of the story that you're playing out? And do you want your characters to be involved in those systems? Do you want your characters to fight against those systems? Or do you not want them to be anywhere entirely? The safety guide and the full version of the rules will show you exactly what you need to have these conversations in a respectful, safe, and comforting manner so that everybody has that wonderful safe space to tell an incredible story and have a wonderful experience. But that is pretty much everything you need for the session 0, at least the way I'm doing it in this video. We have, as I said, we have many more tools available in the book itself when it fully releases next year. Next up is part 2, communicating with your players during a session. Because the process of communication, of course you're going to be reading out the scenarios, adjudicating roles, figuring out what to do with opportunities and complications. Whether you're playing at a table, online, or play-by-post, you're going to be communicating. But you can emphasize your communication in particular directions to maximize fun. First thing I want to talk about is something that our system is very explicit about, but that people coming from other systems might not be used to. And that is, you as the GM should be encouraging creative uses of skills, talents, and your player character's other powers. This is sometimes called the rule of cool, and our system very much encourages it. For example, when a character becomes a Knight Radiant, they get access to 2 surges, which are added on their character sheet as new skills. And there's a reason for that. We want them to treat their surges like a skill, in that they can use it very creatively. Maybe a person wants to, for example, as some people have pointed out in previous stories on this channel, perhaps you have an edge dancer who wants to try to escape a chasm fiend by making themselves incredibly slick and sliding down through the digestive tract. Or maybe even just going down to the stomach and fighting the thing from the inside. That is something that you can do, and it's something you can encourage your players to do. Another huge aspect of communicating with your players during a session is what I like to call cooperative storytelling. As the GM, you're kind of like the referee, the narrator, every single NPC, but you aren't the only person with agency over the story. The best stories happen when player characters feel encouraged to get involved and tell their version of stories as well and influence the narrative. And so one of the ways that we can do this in our system is by raising the stakes. Now, if you read the rules, then you know that this is about adding the plot die to a test. And that can have many possibilities. But you should encourage your players to try to use the plot die because it is so fun. It can take the narrative in wild directions and just really make the session fun with indirections that nobody was expecting. Not you as the GM, not them as the player. And so if players want to raise the stakes, they're allowed to ask you, and you can encourage them in different ways to earn that raising of the stakes. For example, they can try something risky or epic, especially if it's connected to their character's purpose, obstacle, or for Radiant characters, their Radiant philosophy. And you can encourage them to act in these manners if you want an especially memorable game, just like we see all the time with the protagonists in the books. Now, when you raise the stakes, you're probably going to get, at many times throughout a session, opportunities and complications. Remember, you are not alone as the GM in this. It is not solely your responsibility to figure out who's going to be how this narrative is going to be affected by this. You're allowed and encouraged in our rulebook to send it out to the players. So ask your players, hey, what might be a really cool thing that could happen on this opportunity? Or what could be a really interesting thing that could happen with this complication? All of these make the players feel more engaged. They'll begin paying more attention to the narrative because they want to figure out what the coolest thing that could happen could be. And you might even be surprised how much more brutal players will get with their complications than you would as the GM, and that just makes for a far more memorable experience. But still, if no one has any good ideas for an opportunity or complication that was generated, especially if it was by a natural 1 or a natural 20 on the d20, well, you can always fall back on having them gain or lose a focus, or give an ally advantage or disadvantage on their next test. You are not alone in this. Also during a session, especially with new players, you can remind them of rules they might not be interacting with in play. For example, the new actions that are available for them to take. Brace, which is you can take when behind cover or when you're wielding a defensive weapon like a shield. Or you can also encourage them to gain advantage, which if they really, really want to land an attack, because something really bad's going to happen if they don't, they can use one of their skills and roll that against one of the enemy's defenses to try to gain advantage on their next test. Just try to make sure that test goes off. And this is especially true if they have extra actions not available to use on their turn, such as if they've already moved and attacked but aren't really sure what else to do with that remaining action. These are great options. Also, you can remind them how advantage and disadvantage work in our system, with it being able to stack and then choosing a different die. Like, for example, when I'm working with a new player and they have advantage on their attack test, I remind them, hey, you don't just have to apply that to your d20. You can put that on your plot die, on your damage die, you choose. And then, of course, with disadvantage, if they apply that to an enemy, they choose what die that enemy rerolls. Additionally, When a new player attacks and misses, I try to remind them, hey, you can spend a focus to graze and still deal a little bit of damage, especially if you rolled really well on your damage die. Another thing I like to tell the players coming from D&D 5th edition is that not every opportunity, including the ones generated by natural 20s, needs to be a critical hit. You can always use it for the gaining one focus, for giving an ally advantage on their next test, or influencing the narrative, or even using it for one of their specific talents that has a special use case for it. It doesn't just have to be a critical hit, although that is always an option. And then, finally in this section, I like to remind them of the awesome reactions that they have access to, that every single character does. Because in D&D, you're primarily using this for, like, attacks of opportunity, which our system calls reactive strikes. I like to remind them that they can aid to help out an ally in attacking one of their enemies, or even just helping out on a skill test that they think is really important. They can dodge to help avoid an enemy attack, or they can even avoid danger of something like an area effect or rocks are falling that can potentially get out of the way. These are all ways that during a session, you as the GM can communicate to help give your players an even more phenomenal experience and get them more engaged at the table. Now, the final of those three things that I want to talk about today when it comes to communicating with your players is after a session ends. But before everybody leaves the table or the group chat or anything like that. It's always good to have a post-session check-in, which will give you the opportunity to see what's working in your campaign or what might not be working. And in addition, there are things you might want to check in with your players on. For example, engaging with our goals and rewards system. Whenever a player takes on a new goal, they get access to 3 milestone checkboxes that they have to fill in order to complete it. At the end of every session, you should check in with your player what goals they have and talk about, do we together as player and GM, and even to send it out to the rest of the group, do we think that this character made enough meaningful progress toward this goal to mark a milestone? If yes, they can mark it. And this is a way that they can advance their character outside of leveling. And once they get their 3 checkboxes, they can earn their reward in actual play. This is especially true with our ideal talents, which encourage you to complete them at epic climactic moments. Another tool that I really like to use to get feedback on my sessions and make everybody feel good about what's happening is a system that I call stars, wishes, and highlights. So stars, you encourage everybody to talk about their favorite things that their fellow players did. Make everybody feel good and gas each other up. Wishes are the things that people might wish had gone a little bit differently, or things they're excited for. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of look and, okay, this might not have worked as well as I wanted it to, or, oh, they're really looking forward to this, let's put a little bit of extra prep into it next time. And then highlights is you ask the players, and you can share yourself, what your favorite thing is that you did this session. As in, that player talks about their own. Like, what is the favorite thing they did? Then you can say what the favorite thing you did, and all around. And it's just a great way to gauge how much fun players are having, and learn what resonates with them so you can create even better moments in the future. Another great thing to check in with, maybe not even immediately following a session, but maybe in like the week, 2, or even a month in between, is check in and see how happy everyone is with the character they're playing. Does it match the vision they had when they built the character? Are things going really, really well with the talents they took, or are they a little disappointed with a talent or two? If they aren't, then you have 2 options. You can either go the story continuity route, or you can just let them remake the character or introduce a new character. Remember, fun is the most important thing. If a player isn't having fun with their character, then it's not right to force them to keep playing it. If the player wants to change something, but they don't want to kind of interrupt the story continuity up to this point, we actually have a downtime activity in the full version of the rules called self-reflection, which is what a lot of people in video game and games and board gaming and TTRPGs like to call respecking. Basically, they can remove some of their old talents and choose new ones as though they built their character up from the kind of retcon level. There's guidance on exactly how to do this in the full rules. But once again, all of this fun, all of these amazing moments are built on the foundation of good GM player communication. And in this video on GM tips, I think that's the single most important thing. It may seem so clear that a GM should be communicating with their players, but making use of specific techniques like we talked about in this video will really take it to the next level and make your campaigns as awesome as possible on Roshar and beyond. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to Brotherwise Games YouTube channel here, and I hope to see you in the next video.